Coming out of the tunnel with a steel chair, it's Feature Please, A Hateful Voyage to the Delta Quadrant. My name is Joseph.
And I'll be your special 15-second cameo co-host, Peter.
And Peter, what did we watch this week?
Season 6, Season Sucks, episode 15. I don't know how to say this word, Joe. What?
Tsunkatse.
If you say so, man. Let me tell you what I saw here. I saw what, on paper, a lot of people wanted to be a big fucking deal with a lot of star power and as many disco lights as they could fit into one episode.
They definitely wanted this to be a big deal. So I didn't need Memory Alpha to tell you all kinds of interesting backstory about this because I lived it. This was the product of the most magnificent cross-promotion idea ever conceived of by man when it comes to Star Trek, okay? And there was a lot of press about this episode. It wound up being very widely watched. I did note that it had the highest Nielsen rating in the entirety of season 6 by a wide margin, apparently. This, as I mentioned before, is the only episode of Voyager that Stevie had ever seen before she started watching occasionally along with me because it was so widely promoted. And the reason for this episode's existence is the WWE, and specifically WWE SmackDown. Do you remember WWE SmackDown and its introduction to the UPN? Well, golly gee willikers, the UPN was delighted to get a WWE primetime show back
that's peak Attitude Era pro wrestling.
Absolutely. It was at its peak. Raw was, already a big deal by then. It was really well established, and they wanted to expand to Thursday nights, and they wanted a favorable deal on a broadcaster, the non-cable broadcaster that would be able to bring it to everybody. That was why it was another big deal, because Raw was on, I think at the time, was on cable. It might have been on TNT. Maybe Spike TV by then, I don't know, but it was on cable. This was going to be on over-the-air TV, which was super cool for a lot of folks. Vince McMahon straight up wanted the biggest show on UPN to carry water as a promo. He wanted Star Trek to cut a promo for the WWE. That's what this was. This was all Vince McMahon's idea. Not that like the specific plot or anything like that, because I don't think he fucking knows anything about Star Trek, but he definitely was like, cross-promote this with your best show. Is this Trek stuff, whatever, just do it, right?
The blonde, yeah, I want her in it. That one.
So, whatever Papa Vince wanted, Rick Berman was absolutely prepared to provide. And so they came up with this, which is, there is space WWE, and Voyager gets involved in shenanigans. And they spent money not just on production, not just bringing in some ringers when it comes to the guest stars, also the biggest star that Trek ever had, the man himself, Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson.
This was first aired the 9th of February 2000. Today is February 18th. So, I mean, we're 21 years ago on the button, and how far everything has come along.
I'll say The Rock has aged gracefully.
I was going to save this conversation for when he actually comes out. They've got some shit glued to his face.
Mm-hmm.
Even with the shit glued to his face, in his, I don't know what that is, latex leotard they have him in, or whatever.
Right.
Fighting in his goofy laser tag arena. The Rock of 2000 looks less alien than the Rock of 2021. Have you looked at him recently?
He's definitely,
he is bigger than a house. He's completely hairless, and this dude has muscles on muscles on muscles. He's grown his body.
Picture of HGH kind of muck.
He looks like an alien. he does not look like he would any longer be classified as a human being. And I'm not saying that to shit on him. I'm just saying that the level he has gotten his body to is fucking unreal. So seeing him back then with like a whoopee cushion spirit gum to his face, he looks more average and normal and human than he does in his current iteration. It's crazy.
So this was everywhere, man. Like you couldn't look at a magazine stand and not see this being promoted. They spent quite a bit of dollar to get this out there at the time. Um, this was something I actually even saw Jerry Ryan talk about on a number of occasions at convention appearances. You know, like The Rock famously, like, you know, they chatted about their kids while they're between scenes, and then Jerry Ryan goes back to her trailer and there's like a signed picture from The Rock there, and she's like, why did this man do this? I don't understand why he's a big deal. Like Jerry Ryan was oblivious to like who he was as a cultural figure. The peak enjoyment for me though was Jeffrey Combs and JG Hertzler being in this episode. I know
Yeah.
you don't know who they are because they were not TNG people, but they were critical DS9 people. They played two of the more important recurring characters on DS9, Wayoon and General Martok, and they carried so much of the dramatic weight of that show. Jeffrey Combs has been in all kinds of movies. He's Reanimator, I think probably most famously.
To me, anyways.
Yeah, to most nerds. And if you want a taste of how good DS9 is, it's those two being in this thing. They're so much better than the actors that are normally on this show. You know, like they embarrassed the main cast, and they weren't even main cast on their show.
The best part about this episode to me is it is the quintessential bait and switch. Like, what was the movie Executive Decision, where you're like, oh, this is going to be a Steven Seagal movie where he's
Yes.
and like he gets sucked out of the airlock and thrown off of Air Force One at like the 12-minute mark, and then he's not in it for the rest. For something that is, even I knew this is the Rock episode, he's in it for maybe 40 seconds, if that.
Yeah, in the middle of the episode. He's not even in the climax.
Yeah, which was the real impressive part of that all to me. He shows up, he does not lose, which I'm sure was a big deal in the contract. Was that Chuck Norris had the I can't lose? Was it Chuck Norris? Cannot lose in a movie that I appear in? I think it was Chuck Norris.
I'm sure some Hollywood egos have had that clause. Chuck Norris, if not Chuck Norris, someone has.
For being the big deal that a lot of people wanted it to be, this is a turd.
Oh, come on, man. Really?
Don't you even tell me that you enjoyed.
I enjoyed this.
I'm sorry. Don't you even tell me you thought this was good.
I enjoyed this. I'll leave it there. Is it good? I mean, from a serious storytelling perspective, absolutely not. Is it enjoyable to watch unironically? Yes. Come on, man.
So much of this episode can be summed up in what they wanted to be the big fancy set piece. So I did my freeze frame game where, you know, I hit play and then I immediately hit pause. And you've got this close up of what looks like a circus tent. It just comes off looking like low budget trash right off the jump. They pull down and you get a slow 360 shot of the arena where these fights are going down. And there's people in the audiences, and it looks like this arena can hold realistically about 60 to 80 people, which is absurd in its own. But as you get more and more of what this arena looks like, you've been to state carnivals before, right?
Absolutely.
As best I can tell, this arena is just the UFO ride from the carnival.
Yeah, kind of like expanded a little bit.
Yeah, it just looks like a
cardboard
UFO
doors.
the thing that just spins around and everybody's laying in the bed and they shoot up, and the door you walk in, the top part opens and then the bottom part falls, and that's the grand entrance for the fighters we get treated to. So right out of the bat, we've got the first contestant coming out, who I will call Scrotum Neck.
And he's fighting up against a Hirogen, who we will get to know more through the course of the episode. Definitely the first time we've seen one of them in a while. I think definitely the first time since they were Nazis, I think. in season 4.
Yeah. When the species 8472 made its second to last appearance.
That was before the Nazi episodes, because
Was it?
that was one of the many times they kicked them in the dick, and then we're like, oh yes, you deserve to be turned into, meat puppets on the holodeck. You did
You're right.
antagonize them for several episodes.
I'm not gonna lie, I thought it was badass that they had the Hirogen in there. You've got some continuity flaws, like this is the world's shortest Hirogen ever, because the Hirogen are supposed to be like,
Yeah.
we were talking about the little assholes from Virtuoso being one of the rare occasions that we've strayed from the standard human male 5'10" ish in height to like, the Hirogen were big dudes. They were like 6+. They had like crazy tiny, I think was the one guy's name.
They had
Crazy tall actors.
It was JG who was playing the Hirogen, and I guess because they had him in enough makeup as it is, they didn't want to distract anymore from his performance. That in this episode required a lot of stunt work, and shout out to the stunt performer specifically for 7 of 9, who I actually looked her up, a lady by the name of Dana He, who's had got one of the first gold medals in Taekwondo when that became a Olympic sport in 1988. Like, you wondering where all those high kicks were coming from. Well, she was apparently a gold medalist in high kicks.
A lot of wushu kung fu. That's what I called this guy, was a wushu Hirogen, because whoever his stunt, and I'm guessing that's part of why they didn't get a big, tall, crazy, big Hirogen main actor, was because the stunt guy was going to have to be doing some Power Ranger flip kicks off the wall and whatnot.
The guy who played the Hirogen stunt double was named Gary Ray Stearns, who a long-term stunt double. He was Yoshimitsu in the Tekken film. It's like an actual acting role. But he did Kill Bill in Pirates of the Caribbean. He actually did one of the Mortal Kombat movies. Like, yeah, he's got quite a long list here of big things that he's done.
I
on
think
a
the
stunt
only
level.
way they could have made this episode more of a 90s time capsule would have been to have one of the stunt kung fu fighters be Ray Parks.
I mean,
Shit, they might as well just throw Darth Maul in there. That's one of the big misses for me. Is this is one of these episodes where you see a cross section of the Delta Quadrant, and there's all of these different alien races observing, and like I wanted to see more dudes I recognize. Like it was and I know they're far away from everything else, but if you got a Hirogen hanging out this far out, like you could have gotten some.
Hirogen makes sense though, because they wander, right? Like that's their whole MO, is they're out there hunting, and that's kind of why their species is dying off, because they're not concentrated. That was their whole plot point from the Nazi episodes. Yeah. So that one makes sense. It might not have made sense for other aliens here. But yeah, I think they purposely just ditched the tight angle because they were going to have some literal kung fu fighting here, and they could not afford to have one of them in platform boots doing that. So they're like, nah, fuck it. Like, we want good action. This is probably the most kinetic Berman era Trek ever gets in its actual physical fight scenes, right?
Well,
like,
that's what happens when you let Vince McMahon in the writers' room. They're panning around. They're showing you all these different aliens observing. And Joe, did you know that the Maquis fucking love Bloodsport?
Apparently. Like, you definitely see the obvious pan up to B'Elanna and Tsunkatse in taking in the space WWE and being like, yes, violence. But there are other like dudes in Starfleet uniforms in the round as they pan around, and like, I don't know canonically if any of them were Starfleet or if any of them were specifically Maquis, but like, Tsunkatse and B'Elanna are not the only ones enjoying this.
By enjoying, it's like standing up with their fist raised, like screaming. You're going to see a lot of stuff in this episode that does not add up to other informational points that we have been given about life in the post-scarcity Federation and the outlook on violence. So a lot of liberties were taken with character portrayal in this.
Oh, they forced this one down everyone's gullets. Like, we have to do space WWE. Everyone's just gonna have to accept it.
Yeah. So they're on shore leave, right? And shore leave exists solely for the purpose of endangering everybody's life in the crew, and is always a terrible idea. And along that line, Janeway has decided that she does not want to be around for any of it, and she's going to fly over to the next solar system to, I don't know, look at rainbows or something.
Yeah, they don't spend any time telling you about this Nordica Prime aside from characters relating their experiences there. I don't recall like explicitly a Nordican being like this is a Nordican, like identification. They do identify what a Pendari is, which is the system that Janeway's going to, and that is what The Rock is playing.
Oh, is
He's
it?
a Yeah, he's supposed to be a Pendari. The conceit of this episode is Janeway's going to go off on a little vacay during the vacay, and technically Chakotay's in charge, but Chakotay is super into watching alien blood sports with his, former terrorist colleague / would-be side piece, B'Elanna.
I will say that this episode, for being a very shallow promo piece, does actually do a fair job using pre-established character traits, Chakotay in specific, the boxing thing.
Oh yeah, they bring back the boxing thing from what was otherwise a terrible episode, where he has like boxing dream fights with like
Kid
aliens
Chaos,
aliens from another dimension.
aka the last time we have Big Booth be forced on us, who was a character and I thought I'd never wish to not see again, but lo and behold, Voyager was able to accomplish that feat. I was excited for a second. I thought with the captain going off to a distant system, does Voyager have a captain's yacht?
No, I guess you would call the Delta Flyer the closest thing, which is what she takes. According to I'm like physically showing this to Peter. I've got the Eagle Moss.
Well, I'm gonna get my
Voyager.
Eagle Moss.
Yeah, like was we're currently looking at each other over a webcam. There is a spot at the bottom of Voyager saucer section. It's visible in pretty much every effect shot that shows the bottom.
It's an arrow flyer.
The Arrow shuttle, which is, I guess, what you would call the closest equivalent of a captain's yacht on a Intrepid class ship. It was designed and put into the design of the ship and then never used for some reason. The captain's yacht, I think, was something that was invented specifically for like Sovereign class starships in canon.
No, there was a captain's yacht on the Galaxy class.
Was it like in the technical specs, but just not something that was ever on screen?
It was never on screen, but I mean, it appeared in all the schematics and stuff, the side views, and it was outlined in the Burgundy technical manual.
Okay. No, I buy that. Absolutely. I just don't think we've ever seen one on screen until Insurrection. So she's taken off. Chakotay is abusing his authority.
Neelix is on a quest to level up his trash can fire.
This was the most bizarre fucking piece of dialogue. Janeway telling Chakotay, hey, look out. Snarf is wanting to increase the efficiency of his hobo trash can fires, and he's using Borg technology.
Yeah.
Like, okay, listen, Kathy, can we have a fucking talk here for a second? All right, let's sit down. Let's keep it 100. This motherfucker nearly killed us by trying to make cheese. Okay, are you serious?
Want Borg cheese?
If you want Borg, you want assimilation cheese. This is how you get assimilation cheese. Like, of all of the people on Voyager, I would trust Naomi Wildman with Borg nanoprobes before I would trust them the fucking Neelix. Like, straight up, not even hard. Just like, here, child, I assume you will be more responsible with these.
What's that cheese with the pickle in it? What do you call that?
I don't know.
Cheese slices that have like
there's a lot of nasty cheeses in the world, Peter. You're gonna have to be more specific.
All right, well, just listen, man. Like, take a piece of Swiss cheese, right, and then in all the places where there's holes, shove laser pointers and like
glass
holograms and dildo fingers, all right, and tubes. And that's what you're going to end up with this. Like, how hot does his fire need to be? You got plasma fire. Plasma fire is enough to kill crewman Jonas instantly. Instantly consign him to hell. So I don't know what Neelix thinks he needs, but it is, you don't need the Borg stuff in there. We'll later see Neelix in the mess hall cooking a vat of what looks like snot. It's in fact Leola root aloe, which she is going to use to treat a sunburn he got on his little slice of shore leave. And it's like, he's two-faced, right? He fell asleep in the sun, and this happened to plenty of my friends in college, right? Drunk, out playing frisbee, falling asleep in the sun, and then you got two-face. One face is them, and the other face is terribly burned. Now, I don't know what beef he has with the doctor that he's not willing to get these, light sunburns treated when we see much worse things cured with the strobing light of the doctor's flashlight. But he's going to go with his own homeopathic remedy of trash on his face than a trip to sickbay.
It's very Neelix, though. Like, Neelix is the kind of guy who'd be like, oh, no, I don't need to, like, bother the doctor with this. I have this trash remedy where I will put a bunch of snot on my face and I'll feel fine. Like, that actually tracks with Neelix's personality.
And to be fair, it was displayed in, what was the Malon or Malorn? Is it Malorn or Malon? I don't even know at this point.
You know what? It's Captain Planet villains.
Yeah.
That's what they are.
He had a homebrew stew that was supposed to fight radiation, or so he thought. Remember?
Oh, yeah. This is all so that 7 of 9 can pop into scene with Tuvok to say, we think you're having fun is stupid because we are cooler than everyone here. So Tuvok and I are gonna go hang out by ourselves in the shuttlecraft and look at a collapsing micro nebula because we're just too nerdy for y'all.
And raise your hand if the first thing that crossed your mind was they want to go fucking private.
I mean, this granted, right? I would love it if they, like, in canon, this was actually cover for their steamy love affair that secretly 7 of 9 and Tuvok have been banging it out for forever. And they're just super good at hiding it because they're both very reserved. But this goes back to us talking about Year of Hell. If you remember Year of Hell, we're talking about, like, oh, they had this bro relationship that developed off camera during the year. And it made so much sense to us that those two would connect.
Yes.
And like it's shades of that. Like, I'm actually down for more 7 of 9 Tuvok interactions now, especially because, and you just, maybe I'm going to the end a little bit. I feel like if this is a good 7 of 9 episode for, like, they're starting to really, like, connect with where her character is with the writing effectively. She was good in limited quantities in Memorial, when she was there having the conversation with Neelix. This is obviously a much more 7 of 9 focused episode, but it doesn't retread the same like, our complaint was too much retread, too much doing the same shit over and over again.
Same story.
Too much.
Yeah.
She wants to be a real girl. Now she is, and she's dealing with the complexity of her emotions and what that means to her as a person. She's a person now, and there's other growing pains she's going through, and we're actually getting that. I thought that was well done here.
So in Year of Hell, their relationship, their friendship between 7 of 9 and Tuvok grew. A big part of it was Seven's guilt for subjecting Tuvok to an explosion that took his eyesight, right? So it was her fuck up and Tuvok's injury that, in reliance on her, because she became his basically his servant to kind of get him through.
Yeah, his seeing eye Borg. Yeah.
Right. So that was a real strong foundation for that. And if they were to continue their new friendship opportunities here, I like the fact it kind of turns that situation around where there's still an injury that involves Tuvok, but this time it was 7 of 9 going out of her way to save his life and play a hero instead of being impetuous and causing the injury that leads to a connection. But I'm sure they won't capitalize on it.
That was neat. I'm sure it will go nowhere.
Put it right up there with the Klingassians, man. Seven starts packing for the trip. And we get this scene with Tom Paris where he's like, "Oh, you're such a girl. You just pack every stupid thing. And my girlfriend's a stupid girl too. And she packs all this crap up." And then, like, we get some real classic shitbag Tom, the worst boyfriend ever, where he's like, "Yeah, my tough ass hot rod terrorist girlfriend, she totally has a fucking stuffed animal she schleps around her. She'd be so mad if I told you about Toby, the
The Targ.
plushie."
Yeah.
Yeah.
Stevie was watching this episode with me and straight up said in that moment, is Tom here just to try and score a threesome with 7 of 9? Like, why the fuck else is this scene in here? This is like some real awkward shit. I couldn't agree more. It was a scene that had no purpose whatsoever.
No, but now that you've mentioned Tom Balana 7 3-way, I've got some Googling to do after this episode.
Listen, there's no fucking like hate fucking. That's the energy I would get from that triangle,
Mm-hmm. Tom's like, I want to be the weakest person in this 3-way.
If Tom likes to be pushed around, those would be the two broads to enable that particular fantasy.
Actually, that would be Neelix in his masochistic fantasy, I'm sure. Let's not forget when Neelix offered for Balana to choke and spit on him.
I mean, that choke me daddy Neelix simulation the Tuvok has is not born entirely of fantasy. The bottom line here is that Seven and Tuvok go into their shuttlecraft. They're enjoying hours of silence, they're doing their nerd shit, and then the most predictable thing happens, which is an imposing ship approaches. It beams a thing that is so obviously a bomb that somehow Tuvok still needed to scan it and say, "Yep, that's sure a bomb," to identify that it is in fact a bomb. He then touches the bomb, and the bomb goes off and incapacitates both of them. And the point here being is now 7 of 9 and Tuvok have been captured by literal space Vince McMahon. I don't recall this character getting a name. I think I looked it up here. It's Penk. It doesn't matter what this character's name is. It's Jeffrey Combs, so it's great because Jeffrey Combs is great at playing a skeevy asshole. He plays the premium skeevy asshole of DS9 and Wayoon. This is Space Vince McMahon. I just want to point out that in this episode that's supposed to hype the WWE connection to the UPN, Space Vince McMahon is a enslaving supervillain. Like, so on brand.
Who is never ultimately held accountable.
Yeah, who just dodges all consequences at the end of the episode.
Yeah. The setup on this. Okay, so you've got Voyager, which inevitably every shore leave shit goes down and it's bad, right? I want to say the last shore leave episode we had a Borg quartet tried to take the ship over, right?
Correct.
You got the captain in another solar system. Then you have the two smartest people on your ship flying off on a death cart with their asses hanging out, while your Maquis terrorist acting captain decides he wants to go watch Bloodsport more than do work. Like, what a terrible.
It was kind of interesting that he stuck Balana with a command shift. The Memory Alpha actually points out, this is probably the only really interesting piece of information, this is the only time we see Balana in command of Voyager, ever, on the show. She is never in command of on screen. She's technically in command during the 37s, apparently, at some point. I don't recall, but she is actually in the captain's chair for the first and only time in this episode.
Think about how much of TNG was Troy coming to terms with the obligations and of command, and whether she could raise to what was required of command candidates, right? I would have loved to see Balana go through the same thing, like her anger getting the better of her when she did have opportunities to flex on alien problems and stuff like that, and having to learn.
I see what you're saying, but it was interesting for Troy because, first of all, Troy was much more highly ranked than Balana. Balana's technically lieutenant junior grade. and is rarely ever going to be in a position where she would be in command. It's like so uncommon to see this happening here. Troy was a lieutenant commander and constantly on the bridge. I think more importantly, like more in the proximity of power than B'Elanna generally is. And she was stuck in this situation where she had to be in command. She didn't feel prepared for it, so she wanted to become better prepared for it. And a good Troy episode came of that as a consequence. And I agree with you there, but B'Elanna, I just don't think she would sweat that shit the same way, right? She doesn't want to be in command. She's like, no, this isn't. I'm a hot rod mechanic that's a terrorist. I'm not built to be captain of a fucking starship. I know this about myself. But she's kind of self-aware of that. Where Troy's like, I have to prove that I am capable of doing this because I'm so often involved in command decisions as the counselor and space psychic. It would I find the idea of Tom in that position more interesting, quite frankly, as someone who's perhaps has more proximity to that responsibility. Definitely more. He's technically fourth in command behind Tuvok. That he has this checkered past with being in Starfleet, and his dad's an admiral. Like, there's more meat on the bone for Tom to go through that story arc than I think B'Elanna.
I don't know, man. We sit here talking about it. I think these are all stories I would have enjoyed. Like, they've given Harry a taste of command with Warhead, right? And yeah, there's been plenty of Tuvok and plenty of Chakotay in charge, but Tom, B'Elanna, yeah, I mean, even they had the EMH in there a little bit. There's all these good stories they could have told with Voyager, and instead we get this shit in season 6 in its place. It's squandered opportunity. I don't know if you've ever heard me say that about Voyager before.
Maybe 100 times. Maybe like, we count them up. It might be 100 now.
Maybe the thesis of our podcast. So anyways, Tuvok gets blowed up.
They're captured by Space Vince McMahon.
The makeup on Tuvok, his wounds. I don't know what that grenade that they teleported aboard the shuttle was supposed to do. Like, maybe they'd be like, well, we're going to make this thing as obvious of a grenade as possible so people stay the fuck away from it. And him, like, getting on top of it is what ends up getting his face half blown off and his uniform all ripped up. But I thought the makeup on him looked pretty good.
It did. The Space Vince McMahon says, hey, Borg drone lady, I want you to fight in my space WWE. If you don't, I won't treat your friend for his injuries and he'll die. I'll give you this non-fatal match to start out on. You go out there, you do the fight. I'll treat your friend.
Meanwhile, on Voyager, Chakotay's trying to get Neelix to go to one of the Bloodsports with them, and then Neelix is telling the doctor's trying to get everybody. The doctor's real desperate this episode for someone to go to the goddamn museum with him. He wants 7 and 9. 7 and 9 doesn't want to go. He wants Neelix. Neelix is like, go to a museum and look at bugs, or go see Bloodsport. Like, he just teases the doctor with it. I'm like, gee, what would new Jack Neelix do?
Oh, it was a great comedy transition there, where he literally says, "What a tough decision," and then they cut to the Bloodsports, and he's like, "Kill him!" it was actually a well done transition. I do think we do get some new Jack Neelix later on in this episode, though.
Yeah, the doctor drops this great line about how of course, Chakotay's trying to get him into it. Chakotay's an aficionado of boxing, the most barbaric sport in Earth's history. And I'm like, Doctor must not be familiar with the barbed wire backyard wrestling matches.
He must not be familiar with gladiatorial combat in ancient Rome.
My cousin was actually in a backyard wrestling VHS tape you could buy off of infomercials. He was in the clip. I'm watching this thing. It's late. It's college. And I see this guy getting fluorescent light bulb tubes broken over his head. And I'm like, what a dumbass. And I was like, God, that looks like my cousin. Fuck, that's my cousin. So I bought it. I was just looking for my old Xbox 360 games in my closet, and I found my stash of VHS tapes I haven't had the heart to throw away. And there it is, Backyard Wrestling Volume 3 with my cousin
That's
and light bulbs.
that's the kind of revelation that can only come when you live in the Midwest. Like,
Yes.
you only have a cousin who is in a backyard wrestling tape that you buy off an infomercial if you live in the American Midwest. That is ours culturally. Like, we might share it with Kentucky and some parts of Michigan, but that's very us.
Yeah, and they really play up how into violence Starfleet is, which goes against everything else we've seen. The big disconnect for me in this episode, because it gets talked about immediately, like once Space McMahon starts talking to 7 to 9, he starts throwing around red matches, which are literal death matches. One contestant must die. And I have to think that those draw big crowds and that they would be discussed. Like, no one's going to talk to an alien who comes to planet Earth about football without mentioning playoffs or the Super Bowl, right?
Right.
So to bring up like, hey, I'm not going to tell you about the video game Mortal Kombat and not talk about fatalities where you're ripping someone's brain and spine out, right? So when they're telling
Yeah.
Chakotay, who knows every other goddamn thing about this sport, but
He's an instant fan. Like, he studied it all, and somehow
he
you
knows the
missed
rules
that
and
billions
everything.
of people are watching literal death matches, and you just didn't know that part. That's a little much.
So
They should
yeah,
if they had some dialogue where they're like, like, these are exclusive for our high rollers, and they pay a premium to watch actual death
those are
matches.
called
Like,
PPVs,
yeah,
pay-per-views, yes.
yeah, like some dialogue to basically. I mean, you just said it, right? Like, this one you're gonna do here is the SmackDown, but later on you're gonna do a pay-per-view for the belt.
These are the
Like,
clips. These are the clips for sale fetish matches that you have to contact us directly about, and they're very hush hush. I don't know if you ever saw the film 8mm, but think that. So Chakotay not knowing about the fucking death matches where he's balls deep in this sport seems really silly. Or maybe he did know and he was just like trying to sweep it under the carpet like he tried to sweep Suter under the carpet.
what doesn't get swept under the carpet is the arrival of the match where they're at the Bloodsport arena. The Rock comes out in his glory.
With
He
this
gives
great value. And for those of you who don't live in the United States, great value is Walmart's in-store brand. It's fucking terrible. So he comes out to some great value rock intro music.
It does. It is definitely here is your WWE walk-in music. He gives the people's eyebrow, as foretold in the prophecies, right? All of that makeup can't hide that man's charisma. And then from behind him comes 7 of 9, and then all the Starfleet people are like, "Oh, this is probably not okay." Like, they're like, our coworker is down there, and this is weird. They try to call out to her, she can't hear, and that's when they start to piece together that this is being beamed in from an extra location. We already know that because they got kidnapped from the ship.
Now, I know what you're thinking. It's this big wrestling match. How is 7 of 9 down in the ring going to hear 3 people yelling 7 up in the stands, right?
But remember, this is the UFO ride from State Fair.
They literally only have to be louder than 64 other people. It is so unimpressive. Like, I wonder if Vince McMahon saw this and was fucking pissed. Like, I wanted this electrifying fucking moment, and they've got The Rock walk out of a cardboard hole in the wall with like this synthesizer do 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 song. Not even they didn't even afford him like smoke. He couldn't even walk through smoke and lasers. He just walks out of a hole and pops a people's eyebrow. I don't know if maybe they used the wrong footage and this was like a dry run rehearsal without special effects, but real limp. And for this being The Rock's only involvement in the entire episode, it is a super head scratcher.
I do like that they, try to synthesize some WWE smack talk into the dialogue between him and Seven of Nine. There's a charm to them trying to make that work in universe. Like you're as small as a Decalion field mouse or something like that. And we've already given credit, but let's mention it again. Stunt work here was great, very kinetic. Unfortunately for production purposes, Dana, he does not look very much like Jerry Ryan. Dana, he's a professional martial artist, so she is like absolutely like built, right? Like she is tightly muscled. So like they cut to her like doing like fucking high kicks and all her taekwondo shit, and it just looks like a different person. She's blonde, got a blonde wig on and is a woman. But aside from that, is clearly not Jerry Ryan, who is softer by nature than someone who is a professional martial artist in a uniform that leaves nothing to chance, right? Like a lot of arm exposed, muscle definition, all that. Like it's the stunt double when they cut back a little bit, they bring the camera back, and all of a sudden there's a very differently built woman doing like spins and all kinds of like very gymnastic-y things.
So, like a good Borg, Seven of Nine is able to assimilate a rock bottom on her candy ass.
Yes, yes. Aaron just served up with just
Mm-hmm.
right there.
She loses. Chakotay calls the ship. You see a lot of Star Trek. All this fantastic technology. It's easy to take it for granted, right? The only way to fight off the space bad guys with your space lasers, and the only way to get to the next solar system is with faster than light warp speed. It's all stuff. It's fantastic technology with fantastic applications. But every now and then, Star Trek will do something with its fantastic technology that really resonates, and I'm like, oh my god, how fucking cool! When Chakotay's like, "Fuck this shit! I'm not sitting in this parking lot for 2 hours after this concert." Voyager 3 to beam out, and he cheats the process of trying to get out of a major sporting event with instant teleportation. Wow.
Yeah, it's a life hack, man. Some of the worst memories I've had in my life was trying to get out of a parking garage after a major sporting event. Like, my
If that
God.
doesn't put the utopia of the Federation in perspective, I don't know what can.
They regroup after watching all this back on Voyager, and they figure out, okay, so what's happening? It's being broadcast to all of the planets in this sector. It's definitely coming from a remote location. They don't know where. They're going to try diplomatic channels because obviously Seven is there, and they're like, well, if Seven's there, then probably Tuvok's in trouble too, which means they probably got like shanghaied while they were out looking at that nebula. And they're going to, Neelix is going to go off and do his diplomat thing, and they're going to try
Which
and
was
figure out what's
cool.
going on. Yeah, and there's actually a really cool scene when he comes back from his diplomatic efforts, and we get a little new Jack Neelix taste, where he's like describing like the show that the planet's diplomats put on with him, of like, we're so offended, we can't believe this is happening, we'll investigate immediately. And he's like, were you convinced? He's like, fuck no. They were lying out their ass. They make way too much money doing this. Like, this is a huge business for them. Everyone loves this stuff, and no one wants to talk about the dirty that comes with making it. Which, again, I can't believe this is an episode supposed to promote the WWE. Right? I don't know. If you're listening to this podcast and you're not familiar with the shady practices of the WWE through the years, I invite you to Google for them for yourself. Suffice it to say, Vince McMahon is not what you would call an altruistic figure. He is, shall we say, shady at a minimum. And this episode is essentially saying that his business model is criminal.
Cutthroat.
Yeah. But okay.
So the Hirogen, 7 and 9 wakes up after the Rock knocked her the fuck out. And he's hit.
I mean, let's rock bottom on her candy ass. Like, we cannot escape how perfect a marketing moment that truly was.
Yeah. So he's healing her up, and we find out he's already treated Tuvok, and the Hirogen is real friendly with 7. He sees potential. He believes he sees a killer instinct in her, and he wants to nurture it. He knows we get Space Vince McMahon, Jeffrey Combs pop in and say, "Oh, we got really great ratings off of this, so for whatever reason, I'm gonna throw you to the wolves in this next match. Why keep you around and milk you for money when we can put you in a fucking death match?" And the Hirogen says, "I know who your opponent's going to be. I'm going to help you train." We get a little bit of background on him that he was out with his son on this first hunt when Space McMahon captured him. And I have to believe they don't really, it's one of the things they don't address, but I don't think you have to go far to draw the conclusion that all of the, and we'll call them gladiators in this this MMA production are slaves, right? They're all probably there against their will, which is yet another plot hole that we're going to lay on Voyager's feet here, that they don't really help anybody else, and that there's innocent slaves dying to this blood sport. But
yeah, just at the end of this episode, they just leave. They get their dudes back and they're like, none of this, rest of this is our fucking problem, and bounce. Now they probably didn't have any choice but to do that from the set, like from what they set up, but there is no acknowledgement that that's what they did. Yeah, we'll get to that at the end. But
so
the Hirogen is,
Hirogen,
like you said, he's kind of like a veteran. I mean, he's
19
played
years.
He's played by gravelly voice JG, who is an expert at acting through extremely big makeup and does a fantastic job of emoting through it. Just you just kind of know what's going on with this guy just from the non-verbals, which is impressive when you consider the layers that he has to get through to do that. And there's a lot of fight practicing. Again, more stunt work in this as well. And
He gets a good punch in the kidney, which was a good laugh.
there's a lot of the Hirogen, who never is named, not once in this episode, and trying to get Seven of Nine to embrace her killer instinct, which she is resistant to do because she, as we just talked about last week, feels tremendous regret about her killer instinct, that it has brought suffering and pain and torment as a consequence of her actions as part of the collective. And so this is not something she's comfortable with, but she wants to defend Tuvok's life. And Tuvok actually like straight up encourages her too. Like, who says,
Yeah.
which I thought was an interesting note, where she's like, I don't want to kill. It's like, for someone's entertainment, it's like, would you prefer to die for someone's entertainment? I mean, if those are your options, there's only one logical one.
This is the other big thing that doesn't add up for me. Starfleet is so pro-death across the board. Like, you got Starfleet members watching this Bloodsport, getting into it. I don't know if we already skimmed over where Tom starts trying to instigate a fight between Chakotay and Harry Kim.
Yes, he tries to get them to have like a holographic boxing match or something.
You've got Tuvok here, where any other time there's a situation where Starfleet is put in a kill or be killed conundrum, it's always, well, I refuse to participate and I'm not going to take another person's life, which, again, keep in mind, everybody here seems to be a slave. So it's not like you've got, or at least they never express it. Like, some of the people are here because they're just bloodthirsty psychos who want to hurt people and be famous. Like, everybody in there is a slave. So yeah, Tuvok being like, it's okay to kill. I know all the other times we've seen Starfleet say, like, I'll throw the phaser down and invite death on myself. But yeah, it's okay if you kill whoever they put you in the cage with. What?
I think it's closer to correct than maybe you think. Tuvok, being a Vulcan, stating the logical. Your options are kill or be killed. So these are your options. You can either die or be the one that is victorious, but take someone's life in the process. So you have the choice of laying down and dying, which you can, or you can kill and preserve your life, which is probably correct.
This is an interesting setup for Tuvok too, who's pretty useless throughout this entire thing. I mean, he gives the it's okay to murder advice, but we see him one time with a panel off the wall fucking around with the circuitry in there, and that's about it. I think this is probably the first time I have seen Starfleet completely helpless in a situation. Tuvok specifically, who always seems to figure out a way out of the trap, escape the prison, outsmart the system, and this is the first time he is completely at the mercy of what is around him, and it's only through an act of an outside force that saves his ass and prevents bad things from actually happening.
He was passive, but I think like the episode wanting to focus on Seven of Nine made sense, so he couldn't have too an active a role. I just think that maybe his justification was missing an extra line or two about the morality of the circumstance that they were in, and maybe more leaving it up to Seven of Nine rather than kind of pushing her. Maybe that was the problem, to say like, listen, you got to make this choice for yourself. I don't want you to kill on my behalf, but at the same time, there's a deep logic to preserving yourself in these circumstances, but it's also understandable if you choose not to proceed in that fashion and choose to allow your life to be ended instead, right? Like that would have upped the moral ambiguity and would have provided Seven with more agency with her choices as to what am I going to do here, without Tuvok seeming like she's like, yeah, go ahead and kill that guy.
It was Tuvok's basically like fucking Palpatine, like, do it.
Do it. Do it.
Do it. So, time for a plot twist. Seven's death match is with the Hirogen. The Hirogen, he's been in the game too long. 19 years is too much time in the arena, and he is looking for an honorable death at a worthy foe's hands.
So they train Seven of Nine to be that worthy foe. They start kung fu fighting. Tsunkatse and team have figured out that this is all being broadcast from a ship. They find the ship. The ship is like super stacked with ultra tech, and like Voyager has no hope of actually destroying it in combat. But Tsunkatse's like, well, it's an episode about the underdog triumphing over the champion. And they start the fight, and they get bailed out by the fucking I don't know why this works, but Delta Flyer showing up and like literally shooting its antennas off and forcing Space McMahon to like put more energy into the existing others still running broadcasting units so that they can then beam everyone off and then bounce. Like we don't see a lot of the space battle. There is no discussion whatsoever of any fallout for anyone involved, as we have mentioned. We do know that they seem to be incapable of stopping them, that it was really by sheer grit that they were able to even steal off Seven of Nine and Tuvok, and ultimately the Hirogen as well. There isn't any acknowledgement that they couldn't really do anything about it, but the pieces are there. And then in the fight itself, Seven of Nine doesn't want to kill the Hirogen, so she's kind of losing the fight. The Hirogen really wants Seven of Nine to kill him, so she starts calling her weak and imperfect, which like activates her fucking like killer instinct. Her eyes like go bing, and then she just starts whooping on him. And looks like she was at the decision point of, do I kill this guy or not, when everyone gets beamed off and the day is saved.
If only a certain Battlestar Galactica creator, Ronald Moore, had stuck around on Voyager with his perception of reality, what could have happened in this moment? I thought it was so fucking weak. Like right when she's forced to have to make the decision to kill him or not, they beam her out. I mean, it's classic softball Star Trek or whatever, but like I would have really liked to see the consequences of kind of like The Mist, Stephen King's The Mist. Like
I just edited it out. Peter just attempted to spoil The Mist for everybody.
When you've got Stephen King giving you props for going hard, like you did it right.
It is definitely the ending that goes the hardest in movies, so much so that I chastised Peter and cut out his spoiler. You should go all see The Mist.
Yes.
Yeah, go see The Mist.
Did you watch the TV show for it?
No, I only watched the movie. The movie had a lot of like TV people in it, though.
Yeah.
Had a lot of like
Jane's fucking man. I love him. Anyways, so she's got her hands up. They beam him out. They're in the middle of a fucking space combat with like a super Star Destroyer they have no chance against. Yet for whatever reason, their crack pilot, Tom Paris, is in the transporter room with a fucking phaser rifle.
It's just Tuvok's out of commission, I guess. So like he was the security guy for that.
Flying around shooting up like this Why is Tom's ass never in the pilot seat when he should be in the pilot?
That should have been Smoldering Catcher Guy down there, just like
Oh,
just holding like two phasers. It is like two gunning it.
it should have been Smoldering Catcher. We're talking about Lieutenant Ayala. If you've never, it's been a while since we've called him out. The only competent member of the security team. God, how good it would have been if like really sell this cross promotion thing. Have Seven be about to kill, right? So she's down, and then have the bad guy who's going to kill her, but then they beam him in, and Ayala busts that fool over the head with a folding chair.
This was missing like a JR, by God, that man had a family moment, as that wasn't in this. So that might have really done it.
How could we have incorporated a ladder match into this?
So
something in engineering.
I mean, obviously, it's where you do only your most dangerous things, as we have determined.
Do it up in the loft, so like whoever gets knocked off the ladder falls in the Jonas Memorial Death Fire.
Neelix is the ref. He just activates it at the right time. It's a retirement match permanently.
Well, I'll tell you what, man. If anybody's gonna bust someone over the head with a chair, it's gonna be New Jack Neelix.
So before we wrap the episode up entirely here, if you weren't of our age, I guess, like, the Attitude Era of the WWE was probably its peak, right? That was its peak. And so it may seem strange that like this was such a big deal. Like, who cares about wrestling now, right? Like, it's definitely like not as culturally relevant. I'm sure it has a big following still. It absolutely does. But it's not near the level of cultural penetration that I think it was 20 years ago. This was news that The Rock was going to be in this Voyager episode, and WWE was coming back to over-air TV. And it's such a dated cultural moment because of that. Like, that something like that would be a big deal.
And I gotta say again, I mean, it is crazy to me to see The Rock's career where it is now, where he is a dedicated actor, and here he is in a TV show with like 6 lines of dialogue in a 20-second clip or whatever. Like, I really thought he was going to be pivotal to what was happening in this episode, and it's a fucking cameo and it's over. And like you said, like, he's presented as a tough dude, but he's not really a bad guy. But I figured it was going to be like a mountain that Seven was going to have to climb, or an obstacle they were going to have to beat. And instead, he's unbeatable. He kicks the shit out of her, and then he's gone, never to be heard from again.
Yeah, he doesn't even really appear in movies for another couple years after this. Like, The Rock is just a WWE guy at this. He's just The Rock. He's not even Dwayne The Rock Johnson. He's right. Just The Rock, right? So he doesn't evolve into Dwayne Johnson until many, many years after this. It's strange to reflect on this as essentially a corporate promo. This is the only time I feel like Trek has been used in the Berman era to further corporate goals for a network. There was an old TOS episode that was supposed to be a backdoor pilot for a show CBS wanted to do, but it fit a lot better with what rather than what this was. This was a creation of some suits telling, and then the writers having to make it work, right? Like, how the fuck do we do this? And the fact that they subversively turn the WWE enterprise into the supervillains of the episode, and that Vince McMahon is secretly an enslaving dickbag from his impenetrable fortress of doom. Like, I think there's a cleverness to that. I think that was actually neat that they subverted the narrative in that way. Like,
gee, it would have been great to see some production notes or behind the scene information on that, but Memory Alpha is as anemic as ever on this one, with really nothing fun to go off of. I do appreciate that 7 of 9, when she does not have her sexy cat suit on, her fucking implants look gross, and they continue to look gross.
Yeah, they carried that through into Picard. One of the few good things I'll say about that. There is one more scene in the episode, which is when, 2 more. We find out that the Hirogen, they find a hunting party that's willing to take the Hirogen off their hands. And he kind of has that moment with Seven of Nine of like, would you have killed me? And she's like, I don't know. And he's like, yeah, I think you would have. And then she has the last scene with Tuvok in Astrometrics where she's reflecting on like I feel pain and regret. I almost killed somebody. I've lost all of my humanity. And Tuvok's like, the very fact that you're struggling with what you've done morally and not like melting down and not like shutting yourself off from those things is actually a reflection of how human you've become.
And
Which is
Seven, what else is very human is not telling the captain that I was encouraging to murder people. That would be
lying is very human.
So human of you. One time I was human for Tom Paris when I didn't get him in trouble for what was it? Paris did something bad, and Tuvok was like, "I'm gonna ratchet." Oh, making out with B'Elanna.
Oh yeah, yes, in the murder loft.
And if I could be human, Seven, you can still be human. Just remember, snitches get stitches. We all gotta regenerate in our alcove sometime or another, right?
So that's where the wraps. Again, is a good 7 of 9 content here. I think the background of the existence of this episode is hilarious. I think the fact that Vince McMahon is the villain is subversive in a fun way. I think the cheap production values of the actual wrestling is shall we say on brand. And the fact that The Rock is in this for a minute, he lays a rock bottom down on Jerry Ryan.
Elbow, yeah, everything.
Like
I didn't believe it.
The eyebrow.
I want to give a shout out to Ethan Phillips. I so much appreciate him as comedic relief. I really enjoy the way he plays it off and the scenes they give him and just the ridiculous nature of Neelix. I don't know if Neelix was... It seems much more intentional. I think at some point early when Neelix was annoying, they were trying to make him into this serious character, and now it just seems like the writers have fun with it, and Ethan Phillips has fun turning the crap they give him into something worth watching. And it's good Trek humor. I like it. And
it contrasts nicely for when he actually gets to turn his serious acting on, right? Like, he gets to be the comic relief. He does a good job, like, selling the comic relief, like his unsteadiness when he's got the sunburn, like he does the physical nature of it really well and all of that, like totally sold. I was a big fan last week in Memorial when he's a traumatized war victim, literally shooting a phaser at fucking Tuvok, like, looking out for VC in the trees. Like, he does both sides super well. And yeah, like Ethan Phillips as an actor is very underrated.
He synergizes so well with anybody else, but especially the Picardo stuff. And again, like all of him ending up in the sick bay in the early episodes were such grating events, and now I really enjoy watching him play. So yeah, there's good stuff in here, but I think in the rush to give WWE what they wanted, there's some pretty deep sins they do to character portrayals and Starfleet as a whole. And again, shame on Chakotay for not knowing about Bloodsport or death matches.
So what are we watching next week, Peter?
Season 6, episode 16, Collective, and I see 7 of 9, and there's a drone next to her. Several Borg children abduct Chakotay, Kim, Neelix, and Paris. I'm guessing this is where Isheb's going to come from.
I mean, it's hard for him to come from anywhere else. It's interesting that we've reached this point and you've kind of been spoiled on some things when it comes to Isheb and the
thanks
future.
Picard.
Yeah, thanks Picard. But
the least of Picard's crimes.
I would say that upon reflecting upon Picard, the butchery of Picard himself as a character felt somehow less egregious to me than the butchery of 7 of 9 and Isheb. Isheb literally in that show. At least it's a close contender. But yeah, this is the origin of Isheb and some other characters that actually show up here for a little while as well. So it's interesting.
I see episode 17 as more Fairhaven.
Yeah, bro. I think
This
there's
collective better be good, because I'm gonna have to real good episode to like really draw that breath in so I can hold it through.
you're gonna have to hold it for a couple, because Ashes to Ashes is after that, and that's not good.
It looks good. That
It's
looks like
not.
a cool concept.
And that might be one. Maybe, maybe I'll think. I won't even think about it until we are done podcasting next week. How about that?
Fair enough, man.
And something else coming soon for our loyal listeners that support us on Patreon. Thank you very much. Peter and I will be recording shortly on our thoughts regarding Lower Decks. We decided we would review Lower Decks, and so we're gonna do a special Patreon only podcast where we'll kind of take a look at the whole series rather than any specific episodes, and kind of because it's kind of the most tolerable new Trek thing that's been made. I will grant it that.
Well, the most tolerable new Trek thing currently made is the Orville, but I am legit. I am legit excited to do this Lower Decks thing. You're on episode 4 right now, working through it, so I think you're about to see a real upswing in quality of those episodes and their ability to hold interest. So big thanks to everybody out there who made the recommendation. We do that as our next Patreon content, and I'm looking forward to it.
And I look forward to it as well, and we'll see everyone next week.